Trunks tells the gang that the actual artificial humans he now always warned them about were number 17 and number 18. Number 17 is a young man with long dark hair. Number 18 is a young woman with blonde hair and the same denim fetish that Trunks has. They both have hoop earrings and icy stares, which is nothing new for these artificial humans. So now there's no mistaking them, and no way the main villain can just randomly up and change again. Admittedly, Trunks probably should have described them in the first place, so the heroes would have been kept from wandering blindly around the city. But in this case, it ends up being okay, as Trunks probably would have described a geezer and a fatso because, as you've no doubt figured out, this is a massive, massive contradiction to how the arc began. And it all comes back to a man you've heard me talk about a lot on this show, Toriyama Kazuhiko, Toriyama's first editor. However, at this point in the serialization, Toriyama hadn't been Toriyama's editor for almost 3 years. Kondo Yu was. And that's probably partly to blame for how transparent this rewrite is. See, people always talk about this as the arc where Toriyama's editor screwed up his story by not allowing his vision to come through. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. I can't really make a judgment here since I don't know what the story was going to be other than Toriyama's assertion that number 19 and number 20 were intended by him to be the only villains. Maybe that would have been better than what we got. Maybe executive meddling saved this story. We'll probably never know for sure, but I do take issue with the assumption that tends to follow from this, that this is the one time it happened, and is a prime example of how editorial interference destroys an artist's work. And I take issue with that general sentiment because this is far and away atypical of how editing actually works. We really have very little knowledge of specific instances where Toriyama's editors insisted on changes, but considering that's essentially an editor's job, it probably happened a lot. Toriyama was famous for rejecting Toriyama and forcing him to refine his ideas. That's a good thing. But it's not something we'd ever know from reading the finished product because those are things that would be ironed out behind the scenes long before a chapter ever saw print. This particular instance draws attention to itself because Toriyama wasn't Toriyama's editor anymore. That's what makes this weird. Because he wasn't, Toriyama only read the chapter where number 19 and number 20 showed up like the general audience did, and then complained about it after it was already out. Had he still been Toriyama's editor, he most likely would have sent Toriyama back to the drawing board before we ever saw number 19 and number 20, which would have resulted in something totally different from the outset, rather than the mid-flight course correction we got. It's hard to say why Toriyama felt compelled to change things at this point. Maybe Toriyama had enough clout in the company that Toriyama couldn't say no to him. Or maybe this was more constructive feedback from a peer, and when presented with it, Toriyama happened to agree. In typical Japanese polite fashion, Toriyama's rather vague on that point. Right around then was when Artificial Humans number 19 and number 20 appeared. You weren't my editor or anything anymore, but you specifically called me to say, I thought that the enemies had finally come, but aren't these just a geezer and a fatso? In truth, I hadn't had plans for anyone but number 19 and number 20 to appear. But there was no helping it, so I brought out number 17 and number 18. As some of you already know, there is more to this story than that, but I'll wait until I get to it. What I will observe right now, though, is how this, in essence, serves as a soft reboot, long before that term became popularized. In a lot of ways, events play out similarly to how they had at the beginning of the arc. Trunks shows up and delivers an ominous warning. He tells the heroes of 2 artificial humans they must stop. Bluma brings up information suggesting they find Dr. Garrow's lab. The main difference here is that there's no 3-year gap, so there's a sense of urgency that allows the characters' reactions to be much more logical. They have to stop this, and they're going to stop it now. The gang splits up again. Gohan takes Bluma and Yajirobe far, far away from where they can screw anything else up. Ten Shinhan, Piccolo, and Krillin fly off to find the lab. Trunks follows after Vegeta to make sure Vegeta can't sabotage the whole plan by purposely allowing the artificial humans to be activated. And Trunks is actually present this time as self-defeating plans unfold, and therefore is able to react as you'd expect. As far as setting the premise and keeping the tension up, this works so much better to the point that it's almost as convenient to ignore the previous scene as it is for Toriyama to ignore the fact that Trunks did say number 19 and number 20. But I've always thought this would be easy to work around without creating an obvious plot hole. I mean, as long as we're going with the idea that history randomly changes because of timey-wimey, why not just have the numbers change? Say that in his timeline the boy and girl are number 19 and number 20, but because of temporal flux or whatever, those two artificial humans were created earlier in the production line, and thus given earlier designations. Maybe Toriyama thought that would be too confusing, and perhaps he would have been right. But considering the original timelines number 17 and number 18 are barely more than footnotes in this story, it doesn't seem like it would have been that big of a deal. But now we set up one of the best aspects of this arc, the father-son dynamic of Vegeta and Trunks. We saw before, when he was staring at Vegeta, that he was fascinated with this father of his he'd never met. Vegeta already came into this relationship not caring for the boy due to his jealousy of him being a Super Saiyan. At Trunks' return, Piccolo blabbed his name, causing Vegeta to connect the dots. But while it provided a momentary shock, learning who Trunks is doesn't really seem to have changed much in Vegeta's mind. Vegeta clearly doesn't care much about family matters, as he was much more concerned about number 20 escaping than he was at Bluma's car being blown up. Plus, it's quickly clear that he believes Trunks doesn't have proper Saiyan priorities, wanting to stop the threat rather than getting the crap beaten out of him. Kids these days, am I right? Not to mention he has even more reason to doubt Trunks now that he seems to have been completely wrong about everything he said. As for Trunks, he's realizing Vegeta isn't the person he'd hoped his father would be, both in regards to his lack of caring and his lack of common sense. Finally, Trunks has a really unfortunate habit of holding Goku up on a pedestal, insisting they don't fight until Goku gets better, something that naturally pushes Vegeta's buttons every time it's brought up. And so the seeds are sown for wonderful, gooey conflict. So the hairless trio arrives at the mountains surrounding the northern metropolis where Dr. Gero's lab is supposed to be. They split up the Senzu among themselves so they can likewise split up and look for the lab. Piccolo tells them to raise their ki when they find the lab to alert the others. See, this is what I was talking about. Remember, just 3 chapters ago, Piccolo did the telepathy thing instead of this to attract Gohan's attention. But apparently he's forgotten about it now, despite 2 of the 3 characters present already having been established as being telepathic. See what I mean about telepathy in this series being introduced and used very sloppily? But maybe Toriyama was actually in a very consistent mood and decided not to just randomly give Krillin telepathy when he's been surprised by it in the past. If so, good on you, Toriyama, as it is Krillin who finds the lab first, although he's very clearly seen by Dr. Gero. Everyone gets the signal and heads to the door, but it's too late. Number 17 and number 18 are already activated. They put on polite faces at first, but soon snatch Dr. Gero's emergency shutdown controller and destroy it. It becomes clear why Dr. Gero didn't start his rampage with this pair. They're just as dangerous to him as they are to his enemies. In fact, number 17 and number 18 possess an infinite source of energy, rather than absorbing ki like number 19 and number 20 did. While that certainly raises the stakes, I do have to say I'm fond of the idea of a character draining the lifeblood out of other characters, and wish it had stuck around longer. Infinite energy is intimidating, but seems a bit too wanked out. Maybe energy absorption will make a comeback. Vegeta tears down the door, but the villains barely seem aware of them. Number 18 instead discovers another model, a number 16, but this really raises Dr. Gero's hackles. He forbids them to activate number 16, claiming it's defective, and if activated, it'll destroy the world. Sadly, that ends up amounting to nothing. Perhaps that's why, years later, Toriyama will reveal that number 16 was actually created in the image of Dr. Gero's son, who was killed in service of the Red Ribbon Army. As in, that might explain why Dr. Gero is so protective of him. But it has absolutely no bearing or repercussions on this story, and as such, I find it a cheap way to introduce complexity where there is none. It's not as destructive to the narrative as Dr. Gero retconning his way into Red's position, but it does make me roll my eyes. And I'm really only bringing this up because I have a feeling people will ask me about it if I don't. Anyway, at this point, the kids have decided they've had enough and kill the old man. Vegeta treats us to Saiyan philosophy by mentioning how sensible it is to kill people you don't like, and how weird Earthlings are for feeling differently. Well, Trunks may not be a true Saiyan in Vegeta's eyes, but he's all about killing things he doesn't like, so he just blows up the entire lab to prevent this unknown artificial human from being activated. For all the good that does. Now, I've heard people bring up the idea that number 19 and number 20 did exist in the original timeline all along, and that events played out fairly similarly up to this point to how they do in the altered timeline. Trunks just didn't know about them because they were destroyed long before he started fighting artificial humans. And events do play out as Trunks foretold. Number 17 and number 18 destroy their creator, just as in the revised version of Trunks' narrative. I do like that the story leaves things open-ended enough that you can speculate that. But I don't see any reason not to take such statements at face value. After all, why wouldn't there be a number 16 in Trunks' timeline if things played out so similarly, especially since he ended up being the catalyst for Dr. Gero being killed? If these guys couldn't take out number 17 and number 18, it becomes pretty obvious later on that they certainly wouldn't have been able to take out number 16. So it's not as if they destroyed him before Trunks could learn about his existence. And since Toriyama did start going backwards in numbering to introduce artificial humans Trunks recognizes, it's certainly plausible to me that the original Dr. Gero never built past number 18. And since Dr. Gero couldn't have made himself into an artificial human without number 19's help, that all seems to fit into place. I like that people can debate this, but I'm not going to spend too much time speculating on these things when the story itself is already so chock full of things to talk about. Number 16 is activated and all three of them fly off to kill Goku. But they don't really have any strong motivation to do so. Well, number 16 does, but he's still rather nonchalant about it. For the other two, though, they just don't have anything better to do, so they follow what they were programmed to do. It's just a game for them. That's especially true for number 17, who doesn't even want to be told where Goku is, and would rather take a road trip than fly there. That they're so at ease is a wonderful contrast. Number 19 and number 20 were also at ease, well, until Vegeta showed up, but in a utilitarian killing machine way. These guys are likewise the perfect killing machines, but with the mindset of teenage delinquents. That's just crazy enough to be both hilarious and terrifying. Vegeta doesn't care about any of that, though. He's just furious for being snubbed and wants to get his fight on. And when Trunks gets in the way, once again mentioning Goku no less, well, remember how I defended what Goku did to Chi-Chi as not being domestic abuse? Vegeta demonstrates what actual domestic abuse is. Yeah, I sure can see why you guys think he's such a better father than Goku. As the artificial humans are waiting to hitch a ride, number 17 and number 18 reveal that they're cyborgs, humans retrofitted with artificial components. But number 16 is an android, purely mechanical, leaving them to very pointedly wonder why Dr. Gero returned to cybernetics if he was able to create artificial humans out of nothing. Despite making such a big deal out of it, it's never explained. Vegeta easily tracks them down and picks a fight with them. Since number 16 only cares about killing Son Goku, number 18 decides to engage him one-on-one. Vegeta taunts her by saying he won't go easy on her just because she's a woman. But she's not even really a woman, is she? Damn, Vegeta is good at the insults, mixing misogyny and technophobia into one quip. Like the fights against number 19, I love Vegeta versus number 18. It's another quick but impactful fight with memorable choreography. And number 18 is so relaxed and amused by the whole thing that it makes it all the more humiliating for Vegeta when the tables turn in her favor. But even when the others arrive and number 17 reminds them that he'll get involved if they interfere, Vegeta insists he'd rather fight alone and die than depend on Earthlings or Namekians. Funny, he was all about the team up and live lifestyle when it was the Ginyu Special Force. Also, number 17 refers to Vegeta as the Saiyan Prince. How in the world does he know that? Again, it wasn't ever brought up until Namek, and Dr. Gero had stopped collecting data by that point. I suppose I am disappointed that Vegeta ends up tattering number 18's clothes because they're probably my favorite outfit for her but don't really get much exposure. But she gets her revenge by asking if Son Goku is superior to Vegeta. People just can't let that go, can they? But when Vegeta insists he's stronger, she rubs the salt in by saying that means she doesn't have to worry about either of them. Now, this Toriyama mandated twist in the story may have resulted in a plot hole, but structurally, this works really well here. Number 19 and number 20 ultimately serve as red herrings. They're dangerous enough, but taken out with only a couple of characters being defeated. It lulls them into a false sense of security. It makes them feel they've won, they've changed their destinies, right before the rug is pulled out from under them. Now we have these new villains, and they waste no time proving how dangerous they are. Number 18 breaks Vegeta's arm, and despite Trunks' anger toward his father, he can't help but rush to his aid. And Piccolo and Ten Shinhan, despite knowing how screwed they are, rush to Trunks' aid, causing number 17 to make good on his word. And just like that, in that one moment, that one impulsive decision, everything falls apart. This curb stomp of a fight is just glorious to watch. I say the series depends too much on one-on-one fights at this point, but this just demonstrates how much more fun a good group battle can be if done well. Even though they're greatly outnumbered, the villains expend no effort keeping their adversaries at bay. No matter how many times the heroes get back up, they're immediately taken out again, despite the artificial humans being otherwise occupied. I think the best example is when Vegeta gets up to go after number 17, who is busy strangling Ten Shinhan. Number 18 grabs Vegeta by the leg to stop him, then Trunks gets back up, so number 18 just throws Vegeta at Trunks, taking them both out. And then they just stop and go on their merry way. This could well be my favorite moment of this arc. Keep your eyes peeled to this channel because there will be a bonus video connected to this episode you just watched. It is my special The Making of Dragon Ball Dissection video. Follow along as you see how a Dragon Ball Dissection episode is made, from beginning to end. Hope you enjoy it!